The city of Barrie and Simcoe County continue to pass the buck to one another as the homeless population is suffering due to the lack of a full-time warming center. During the February 15 City Council meeting at Barrie City Hall, Jennifer van Gennip gave an emotional testimony asking for the full funding for an all-winter warming center. Gennip is a housing advocate at Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness. She shared a story of Texas, a father and grandfather who had been homeless for about 3 years. He was recently diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He expressed his fear to her that he would die alone in a snowbank. Gennip lamented that she had to appeal to the council for help to simply keep people alive during the winter. The John Howard Society's warming center is allowed to open only when the temperature drops below minus 15 degrees Celsius. Their proposal to the county to provide daytime warming center was unfortunately denied. In an interview with Barrie Community Media earlier this month, Haley Murdoch-Fike, Executive Director of John Howard Society, stated that roughly $300,000 is needed to run a 24/7 warming center with 2 staff members for almost 6 months. Many councillors, including Anne-Marie Kungal, Claire Ripma, and Jim Harris, expressed an urgent need to address the issue. However, the majority of council remain indifferent to the cause. Social services such as warming centers are funded by the county, which is in turn funded by the city. The final discussion and voting on service partner budgets will take place on March 8th.
So we move into deputations for the evening. Tonight we have a deputation by Jennifer van Gennip regarding motion 23-G-023, the 2023 business plan and budget. I will now call upon Jennifer to the podium to provide the deputation. Please note that in accordance with the city's procedural bylaw, a maximum of 5 minutes is permitted per deputation. And so we'll begin.
Good evening, Mayor Nuttall and members of Good evening, Mayor Nuttall and members of Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening as we prepare to approve Barrie City budget. I am here on behalf of the Barrie Housing and Homelessness Justice Network to ask for your consideration of funding for warming centers for next winter. I'll begin with a reminder that housing is a human right. Everyone deserves a safe and affordable place to call home, and that's what I usually come here to talk to you about. However, as we work toward this goal, we also have a duty to ensure our unhoused residents have adequate and accessible shelter around the clock, particularly during the winter months. The need within our homelessness system in Simcoe County exploded during the pandemic, and we saw for the first time a funded warming center in Barrie last winter, from January to March of 2022. That warming center, jointly funded by the county, the city, and community donations, was led by the John Howard Society and supported by the Gilbert Center along with volunteers, and operated every day and night for over 2 months and served 195 unique individuals. The warming center quickly became a vital service, providing a consistent, welcoming, low-barrier place to escape the cold and even just use the washroom for people whose needs were not met within our shelter system. With their permission, I want to share about 3 people I met last winter who used the warming center. One of my friends, who now lives in a rooming house and prefers to remain anonymous, used the warming center regularly as it was a space that welcomed her and her partner together, as well as her dog. They were not able to stay together in our shelter system, and her anxiety about being separated was too high. Before the warming center opened, she often spent the night in the TD parking garage or in the doorway of the ranch. She did not have money to spend her days in coffee shops and restaurants, and her dog made the library off limits as well. The warming center provided much-needed refuge. It's also where we could fill out Ontario Works paperwork together and work toward getting her some housing. Another friend that I met at the warming center, T, has recently moved into Lucy's place. Though she had a bed at the Busby Center last year, she still needed a place to stay warm during the day. T doesn't need a warming center this year, but she wanted me to let you know how important it was for her last year and how important it is to others still in that position to have that consistent option, not just when it's minus 15 degrees Celsius. My third friend goes by the name Texas. Texas is a dad and a grandfather, even though he's just a few years older than me, who has been homeless for about 3 years. When I met him last January, he told me that he had stage 4 cancer, he had just been discharged from the shelter, and he was terrified that he was going to die alone in a snowbank. He had a phone, and so, as I'm sure any of you would have in this situation, we arranged that if he ever needed to, he could call me and I could drive him to the warming center. And if I couldn't, I could send an Uber for him. And we both found this safety net very comforting. I just want to clarify that I'm not crying because I'm sad. I'm crying because I'm furious. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, even 1 year ago, I would have been here asking you to support affordable housing policy. And this year, the goalposts have moved back so far that I have to ask you to help us keep people alive in the winter. Sorry. Unfortunately, Texas is still outside this year. He was one of the people who moved into a tent when the Travelodge closed. This winter, the John Howard Society's proposal to the county to provide daytime warming was denied, and funding was provided only for overnight warming and only triggered by temperatures of -15 or lower. Texas does not have the same safety net this winter, and I've been really worried about him. With the temperature restrictions, the warming center has been open only a handful of times, but when it is open, it is regularly at capacity. John Howard's executive director, Haley, shares that approximately 1/3 of guests report having been turned away from other shelters, and 2/3 of guests did not try the shelter first for reasons ranging from being turned away frequently in the past, knowing they could not follow the rules, not feeling safe there, or being unsure if their restriction period was up or not. It's important to note that before the pandemic, cities across the country were pretty consistently reporting that about 15% of their shelter system users were chronically homeless, and the rest were experiencing a short homelessness episode. Some light help, and they could get back into housing with minimal supports. Through the pandemic, we have seen chronic homelessness balloon into now the majority of those in our homelessness system. The longer a person is homeless, the traumas, the sleep deprivation, the impacts on mental health, and the social exclusion, they compound. And that person requires significantly more supports to accompany their housing if they are housed to support their recovery. We are dealing with not only a much higher number of people experiencing homelessness, but also the individuals have significantly increased complexity of needs, and it gets worse the longer that the need goes unaddressed. When you have a lot of people with high needs but not enough staff to support them adequately, safety becomes an issue. It's not a lot different from needing more EAs in classrooms. When there isn't funding to adequately staff a shelter to meet the needs of the people there, the safety of the larger group takes precedence, and people who need supports the most can be asked to leave. Once we acknowledge the number of people not served by our shelter system, even when beds are reported empty, and we acknowledge the fact that shelter users are required to leave each morning, and we acknowledge studies that show hypothermia can occur even above 0 degrees if a person is wet and gets chilled, the need for around-the-clock warming centers is very clear. Last week, the Ontario Human Rights Commission came out with a statement urging municipalities to uphold the rights of people experiencing homelessness and adequately fund and provide enough indoor spaces around the clock for anyone seeking shelter, either in warming centers or in community spaces. They also stated that policies and programs designed to address the needs of people experiencing homelessness must be grounded in human rights approaches and delivered with respect and compassion. This aligns with the values expressed when I watched this council sworn in last fall. Mayor Nuttall, you unequivocally stated that Barrie is a city of people who take care of each other. Yet we have allowed a winter warming plan this year that is inhumane, that is not based on evidence, and that has left many feeling decidedly uncared for, abandoned by their community. I have here letters with me from the Simcoe-Muskoka District Health Unit, the Simcoe County Poverty Reduction Task Force, the Barrie BIA, and the Barrie Police, all who have written to support our request for 24/7 warming center funding for next winter. Funding warming centers is a hot potato in Barrie, with neither the county nor the city wanting to include this critical service in their operating budgets. It seems to fall in a gray area of what is considered a social service. When we first brought forward the need for warming centers, it was tied to the pandemic-related closure of so many downtown spaces, and it felt like a short-term need, a one-off, so we didn't need to build it into our long-term planning and budgets. The reality has been that COVID funding and restrictions have ended, but the pandemic has left behind a significantly increased need, and the social service resources must be adjusted to meet that increased need. We are asking you to recognize our shared obligations to the members of our community who bear the brunt of the societal failure to provide adequate housing for all, and create a line item in your operating budget to fund warming centers until such time as we have adequately addressed the crisis state of our housing and shelter sectors. And we also ask that you petition the County of Simcoe to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation this evening. Are there any questions from members of Council? Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, through your Mayor Nuttall, to Ms. Van Gennip. Thank you for your deputation. I always find it'll be a mark of a good year when we're not seeing you having to take the podium year after year as maybe a metric of, there's been a change made because you raise and you're at tables where you're seeing on the ground impacts of the lack of some of the supports. So some questions that I have. When County of Simcoe was here presenting around their services and their budget, if I'm recalling correctly, I believe they budgeted about $100,000 for a warming center, and I asked at that time if that was sufficient. I believe the commentary was it was, and I'm also interested in hearing from them what proportion of that amount of dollars is actually going to be coming to Barrie and supporting high needs demands here. And I believe we've had those conversations historically about the impact of the service that Barrie is seeing for individuals. Do you have an opinion on what is it fair to ask you if you have a sense of, based on the gaps, what is a sufficient amount of money to operate that, and or are you seeing opportunities to have a conversation about, like an honest conversation about what would it take to close the gap?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor Nuttall. A few things there. So one is, yes, the county has budgeted $100,000 for the entire county for warming centers, and that's done through an RFP. So this morning, the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness met, and they were unanimous in a letter to County Council saying $100,000 is not enough. This year it left several areas without a warming center at all, and it left Aurelia and Barrie with very inadequate service, only operating at -15. To the part of your question about what it would take, I have asked Haley at the John Howard Society. She is the new executive director there. Her estimate is that for 158 days, which is almost 6 months of a warming center here that was operating 24/7 with 2 staff and rent, that it would be almost $300,000. And to the part of your question about, do I think there's still room for a conversation there? I do have the sense that with county, that they're willing to look at it some more. I don't really know why. I don't really know the politics of why, but they did budget $100,000. But there seems to be some willingness to look at it again, based on, like, once this season is ended, looking at the statistics and considering the need.
A further question. So in your presentation, an ask to us was about advocating for Simcoe County Council around more substantial support in Barrie. Mm-hmm. There was conversation, and I'm not sure if you've got more line of sight on this than I may, but there was reference to a report being done around our shelter systems and a bit of a review, and maybe, I'm hopeful, digging into the metrics a little bit about what are the conversations we're actually having, because it feels cyclical, right? So we talk about, are there beds? Yes, there are beds available. And so sometimes I feel the conversation ends because it seemed to feel like we've got capacity to fit the need, but we're not maybe shifting or reframing the question, which is, why aren't people using those spaces? Yes. And so I'm not sure if that report coming out is timing to which to build a case around also funding or readjustments of funding about what shelter systems need, if that's coming out of the metrics in addition to this ask. So is there a timeline aligned to that report that you find might be advantageous to be looking at?
Well, I think it's good that it's coming out. It's supposed to go to County Council April 11th is the date that we've been given. I don't know what it's going to, I have no idea what it's going to say. But I think it is useful, timing-wise, it's useful that we're having this conversation now and in April, not in November, We have a history of having this conversation in November, and then it's an emergency. So I do think it's the timing. I mean, in a way, the timing is good because it's before winter, but in a way, it's so County Council approved yesterday the funding allocations for the entire homelessness system for the whole year. So when the report comes out 2 weeks after, well, not 2 weeks, but a few weeks after that happens, it means it's going to take quite a while to implement whatever the recommendations were because the funding has already been allocated.
And then last question. So knowing County Council came forward with a budget, they have approved their budget, I believe, at this time then. Is there any other conversations that are happening through SCADA or any other tables around identifying that that's not adequate or getting some type of rationale to say there needs to be some type of protected amount to make sure all communities are getting something, but also then the broader picture to say, are you even touching the need?
Yeah. So as I said, it came up this morning with SCADA, so a letter has gone forward. Hopefully that's the beginning of a conversation, not just a letter that goes nowhere. The letter goes to the County Council, not just staff, but to County Council, and it's CC'd to this council and other councils as well. My sense, so the fund, because the budget's been approved. What is left over though is there is some Reaching Home money, which is our federal funding that goes through the county. And Simcoe County Alliance and Homelessness Steering Committee acts as the community advisory board for those Reaching Home dollars. So I have suggested, or it's been suggested, that perhaps warming centers could be positioned as warming centers / coordinated access points. And if we did that, if we tied them into an access point for a coordinated access system, then it would make Reaching Home dollars available. And there are quite a few unallocated Reaching Home dollars still that are left for needs that arise. So that is a place that County Council could direct staff to look at, perhaps.
Okay.
I don't know all the details, of course, but I do know that that is some unallocated money for this sector.
Okay, that's helpful because not a question to you, but it'll be a question I'll pose after the presentation, but probably to Mayor Nuttall, because the Ontario Big City Mayors came out with a statement around housing and homelessness, and I didn't really see anything tied to warming centers. I could be wrong, but we're still stuck in the secular conversation of nobody owns it, no one's responsible.
That's the problem.
And so here we are again. So I'll take that away and then maybe revisit about how do we get that on the agenda and where does that fit in the conversation that seems to be happening with the ministers.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Sorry, yes, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through you to Ms. van Gennip, thank you for your deputation and dedication. And you had referenced the winter warming programs for 2022-2023, and I appreciate the $100,000 that was allocated. So, and just to help people understand, and I know that Alliston, Collingwood, and Midland didn't make submissions, and curious if that was a coordinated effort to say, listen, we know our communities of Barrie and Aurelia may need this more than us, and so they stepped out, or because they didn't apply. Just curious if you give some context on that.
Thanks to you through Mayor Nuttall. My understanding from conversations in community was that you can't do anything with $20,000. You can't run a warming center for $20,000, and they figured that would be their piece of it. So they didn't even apply because you really can't do anything with $20,000 for a warming center.
Okay, so then it ended up with the split between.
So then,
Okay.
Between Barrie and Aurelia for the most part.
So you've given us lots to think about, and I do appreciate, and I think I was last chair of the Barrie Chapter Alliance and Homelessness in the early 2000s, I guess. And at the time, we were really hoping to move towards focusing on more housing. So I appreciate the feeling and the recognition of and now we're trying to create more warming centers. Is the key difference as far as the policy that we have now, or the several key differences, obviously the funding, but we've had the temperature barrier or threshold, and that got reduced. But that's really something that I hear you saying clearly is that temperature threshold needs to be moved out completely, right? That's one key element. And then with this year's operations, I believe when the county was here, they gave us new information which we hadn't been advised, but we heard that they were using the Rose Street facility as a warming center. How did that help, or how much was it effective? Or that wasn't what they had originally planned, but I hear that they transitioned to that at some point.
So on the weekend that was very, very cold, a couple weeks ago, they allowed people who were already staying there overnight to stay during the day. But it was not a warming center. It was people who were already there overnight were allowed to stay for the day, and then that ended at the end of the weekend.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I don't have much more. Just again, thank you. And we want to work with the county. Obviously, we want to work collaboratively. We want to create a system such that people aren't driven to one community because they want to stay in their home community. So if we don't equitably distribute resources, then we end up having, these regional homeless hubs. Understandably, you'll go where the service is, where the warmth is, where the temporary shelter is, all those things. So I appreciate your effort to see this from a county perspective and having each community take the responsibility to serve their members. So, and definitely, hopefully, the county hears the message that what does it cost? What's the actual cost to provide a warming center? And, they get their money from us, right, if I'm not mistaken. So, but that wasn't in the ask. And that wasn't detailed this year as far as I can recall. Any thoughts or from the county alliance and kind of getting that information to them as all of us work on budgets for 2023, which would include obviously moving into the winter of 2023-24?
My thoughts on starting a conversation about getting it in the budget? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, we're here now during budget at the end, but was it those discussions about kind of having that as an element throughout the county as each municipality reviewed its budget, and the county didn't have this new? I know we have new money. The county wants more money, but I didn't see it as part of the elements of here's one of the things.
Yeah, as far as I know, the offering is $100,000, which was the same as this year, and it wouldn't have been based on any great outcomes from this year because everyone is in agreement that it was completely inadequate for this year. So I'm not really sure how they came to the same number. I am no longer at the steering committee for SCADA. I'm just at the Barrie chapter, so I didn't really have an opportunity to speak into it earlier at the county level. But I would like to think that those conversations were happening, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you for sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Marlene. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris and Councillor Ritma, and then Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's really great that you're talking about this now in February, because the need is certainly going to be here in November. And if we don't make some plans now, we'll be scrambling later. You said that the county had $100,000 that they spread around was for the whole county, and then you mentioned a number of $300,000. Now, is that for the whole county, or is that something else?
Through you, Mayor Nettle, the $300,000 is Haley's estimate of what it would cost to run a Barrie warming center with 2 staff 24/7 for almost 6 months.
Okay, so that's just for Barrie as opposed to the whole county.
Yes. This year their budget, they were given $56,000.
Okay. And I guess my second question is, have you approached the province at all? I mean, there's where the big pockets are.
Yes, thank you. In my role with Barrie Homelessness and Housing Justice Network, that's a little bit beyond our scope. You are kind of where we come to have these conversations, but I am also the chair of a co-chair of the Ontario Alliance on Homelessness, and we are trying to create a relationship with them there as well. We haven't been able to get a meeting yet with the social service, the Minister for Social Services, only with the Minister for Housing, but this is something that we would bring to them as well.
One final, item, and that is, you mentioned bringing together some different funding sources and different programs. And I'm just wondering if you feel that the county is open to doing that in terms of connecting the warming center, if you will, with housing. And where I'm coming from is that I really don't want somebody to come to the warming center for a cup of coffee. I want them to come there and get warm, but also that there's a process in place that they can go and somebody's working with them to put them into permanent housing. Because, yeah, the warming center is needed, but it's a Band-Aid, and we need to get rid of the Band-Aids. Yes. So do you feel that the county is open to that kind of approach?
I would hope that they would be, and that would be the approach that would make warming centers qualify for Reaching Home dollars. Reaching Home dollars have to be quite housing focused. So the way we have proposed it is to stay on the priority list for housing. Your HIFAS file, your spot on the by name list, your HIFAS file has to be updated every 30 days. And if you are not updated every 30 days, you will not come up. So if a spot opens up at Lucy's place and you are very high priority, but you have not had your file updated, your name will not come up for that spot. They won't even see your name. Just the way the filtering works, they won't even see your name. So what we have proposed is shelters do not have capacity. It's well established now in our coordinated access system that shelters do not have the capacity to keep those files up to date. Also, even if they did have them up to date for everyone in the shelter system, there are people outside of the shelter system who are not having their files up to date. So what we have proposed is that the warming center could be an access point to keep your file up to date. That solves kind of two problems, and it avoids, we want to give out coffee, but we do also want to, I don't want to see the same people at the warming center 3 years in a row. I don't want to have warming center friends. I want them to get housed. So we are aligned on that goal.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just curious, the number of $300,000, which, and I know you didn't prepare, but you were given the report. Do you know roughly how many people that would serve? Like, I'm trying to get my head around what size of facility, and also 2 staff. I mean, it'd be a 7-day-a-week operation, so I don't even know if 2 staff is enough to do that. But they work long hours, I guess. Yeah.
Correct. Sorry, not 2 staff. To have 2 staff on at all times. So
at all times. Okay.
Yeah.
So right. Okay.
Yes, I didn't. You're right. It's not my number, but I would say 2 staff for safety, no matter what the number is, would be a minimum.
Exactly. Yeah.
In the current space that they're in, I know capacity is 18, but I know that if it was a slightly bigger space, they could have slightly higher capacity.
Okay. So you're saying the facility that could provide service to 18 people is what's needed? So it's not a huge facility. No. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nettle. Actually, just thought of a question that came out of what Councillor Nixon had asked. I know in the past it's always typically been very city-driven when it comes to these warming centers. How do you envision this moving forward? And the other part of my question is, obviously, the money would be used to lease a property that you had mentioned, but a lease you're obviously having to pay for an entire year. So what other uses would you envision this space being used as in the off-season when it's not being used as a warming center?
Thank you for the question. So right now we're renting spaces from churches, so it doesn't have to be a lease. It's just space that we're using in a church. It's just kind of expensive. But if we did have a space, actually more people die of heat-related injury than of cold-related injury, so it wouldn't be the worst thing to have it run all year round, really, because it reaches 30 degrees Celsius sometimes here, and it's quite dangerous. So if we had a space, we would probably just run it year round. That's probably not the answer you're looking for, but it would meet that need. Yeah. But right now, what we're asking for is really just rent for the 6 months through one of the churches in the downtown.
And who do you envision taking the lead on this? Because I know, like back in the day, we had In Out of the Cold. That kind of unfortunately fell by the wayside, and it's kind of a few different service partners, and some of them are kind of just interested people in the community that have started their own little community group to help our unhoused people. How do you envision the lead on this, and so that way we can kind of get a vision as to what Jennifer van Gennip envisions this to become if this was to move forward? Thank you.
This year, I'm not opposed to the format where the county puts out a request for proposals. That's a very transparent way of divvying up this funding, and if there was more than one proposal, it would make it even more advantageous, because you could look at your options. Right now, the only agency that is putting proposals forward is the John Howard Society.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. This question maybe to Ms. McAlpine through you. Did we not give the county last year $400,000 and they matched to make it 1.2 is what's facilitating the Rose Street modular warming center?
Mayor Nuttall, thank you, and through you to Deputy Mayor Thompson. Yes, you are correct. The city provided $400,000 and the county provided $800,000 for a total of $1.2 million. That is for temporary additional shelter, which is different than what Ms. Van Gennip is seeking, which is warming center space. And the city also provided up to $50,000 towards the warming center space that John Howard Society is able to operate with the funds between the county and the city in Barrie. Traditionally, warming centers in Ontario have not been operated by municipalities or the municipal level of government. In most cases, they've been operated by outreach organizations, faith organizations, people in the community who might have space and the ability to offer those services. The province doesn't consider warming centers part of the homelessness prevention system, and they allowed an expansion of their view during the pandemic, but noted as funding that they had provided that was pandemic specific was wrapping up, that they would go back to their view that warming centers were not part of their view of the homelessness prevention system, which is why Ms. Van Gennip has suggested the Reaching Home funding. It's federally funded, but the county would need to be able to make that link to housing for it to be able to utilize any funds for that purpose, which is one of the challenges with the system. Sorry, that was a long-winded response.
No, I appreciate that, and I apologize. I actually misspoke. I meant the temporary shelter, but I'm just looking at, and this was a conversation, and I remember Councillor Hamilton talking about the capital investment into those modular. It seems like an awful lot of money at the price tag for $356,000 to continue it through 24 hours a day, and we've spent $1.2 million on 50 beds that are only operating at night, where I think, frankly, the system is broken. It's, I think, how we're spending the money. And, you know, today in the paper, it was $19 million for a homeless strategy, which I would love to know what the administration costs are and actually how much are getting to the most vulnerable. So, like I said, you know, thank you for your deputation and stuff. I just, I think we've got to lean on the county a lot more, because I just think that, you know, we have stepped up, and you know, it's obviously not enough, but council previous and, you know, had given money, and we still have a major gap. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Are there any other questions for the deputant? Seeing none, thank you so much for your deputation this evening, Jennifer, and we'll be moving into the budget shortly. We have no other deputations this evening. Remove past tax applications and communications. To committee reports, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Hamilton, that Section A, a general committee report dated February 1st, 2023, as circulated, be adopted.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. It's moved by yourself and seconded by Councillor Hamilton that Section A of the General Committee Report dated February 1st, 2023 as circulated be adopted. 23-G-019 confidential instructions to be applied to negotiations intermunicipal relationships. Are there any questions and comments with regards to the motion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Carries. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Hamilton, that Section B of the General Committee Report dated February 1st, 2023, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Hamilton that Section B of the General Committee Report dated February 1st, 2023, as circulated, be adopted. 23-G-020, Bill 23, Municipal Housing Pledge. Are there any questions or comments from members of Council?
Record a vote.
A record of vote is being requested by Councillor Morales. Madam Clerk, is the record of vote, are you able to conduct that for us, please?
Yes, of course, Mayor Nuttall. I will start with Councillor Hamilton.
Yes.
Councillor Morales.
We're going backwards. Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Harvey.
Yes.
Councillor Negussi.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Councillor Corser.
No.
Councillor Kungle.
Yes.
Councillor Nixon.
Yes.
Councillor Rima.
Yes.
And Mayor Nuttall.
Yes.
Motion carries. And I like to keep you on your toes.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Hamilton, that Section A of General Committee Report dated February 8th and 9th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that Section A of the General Committee Report dated February 8th and 9th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted. This is 23-G-021, the 2023 Business Plan and Budget for the Barrie Police Services Board. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. In order to meet my legislative requirements under Section 17, Sub 3 of the Police Services Act, I will not participate in this vote.
Madam Clerk, is the conflict being noted?
Yes, Mayor Nuttall, it has.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments with regards to the 2023 Business Plan and Budget for the Barrie Police Services Board?
point of clarification. Sorry, forgive me. Is it just the Barrie Police Services Board that we've parceled out, not the A and B agendas?
Correct. We do that so that we can deal with the conflict.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Hamilton, that Section B of the General Committee report dated February 8th and 9th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Hamilton that Section B of the General Committee report dated February 8th and 9th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted. This is 23-G-022, the 2023 Business Plan and Budget for the Service Partners. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Congo.
Process question, if I may, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to the clerk. So there's always that tipping point when we're in the budget around like what's been included and what we're approving, and then what comes to different planning tables after the fact. And we kind of say, well, you missed the boat. But we do have things that we've discussed at this council that do have budget impacts. And one in particular were recent referral motions regarding the Barrie Farmers Market, related to asking for clarity about $25,000 that they had in last year's budget and if they want it again. So for process, should we be making any amendments to this operating plan budget, or are we okay to receive asks knowing that they're already tabled on agendas coming after the fact?
Sorry, Councillor Kungle, this isn't the right motion for that. This is actually the service partners being dealt with on the night. I believe it's March 8th, Madam Clerk. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor Nuttall.
Okay,
so I think the
no,
next one
it is.
the
Yes,
one,
sorry,
yes.
I read it as the number you read out as the business plan and budget. So thank you. I'll hold.
No problem. But we have your question, and so we can deal with that at the next one. With regards to service partners, are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
By myself, second by Councillor Hamilton, that Section C of the General Committee report dated February 8th and 9th, 2023, as circulated, adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Hamilton that Section C of the General Committee report dated February 8th and 9th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted. 23-G-023, the 2023 Business Plan and Budget. And Councillor Kungle, just want to reinforce that question so that we can get an answer for it.
Thank you. How, I'll start with to the clerk and or then to Mr. Miller. Should there be items on discussion that are coming up in future committee meetings that impact the 2023 budget, and we have one that has already been tabled, how do we, is there a best practice? I just don't want us to say you had the opportunity to make an amendment in this budget, but that's in advance of actually getting clarity from a provider. But we know the ask is coming. So should we make an amendment in this to hold for an amount so it's secured in some way and then just recover it if it's not needed? Or is there a period of time to which we would want to actually close out the 2023 budget?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall. Ideally, you're closing out the budget, so if you want an amount in there, I'd suggest do it now. We are, as you say, considering, our council is considering the service partners' budgets on March 8th. Beyond that, if there's a need for funding, there are reserves and that sort of thing, but ideally, from a financial perspective, we like the budget to be one document.
Thank you for that clarity. So perhaps if I may, I'll open it for maybe a bit of a conversation. We know that the Barrie Farmers Market has identified the benefits of $25,000 for the mobile market. They gave us some stats and recommendations tied to that. We had actually deferred some of the conversation to finance and responsible governance, but we have not met yet as a committee. So I believe they are coming to our next agenda. I'll look to Councillor Harvey as chair or to Ms. Cook. But I believe we're meeting in March, perhaps. So it's not too far out. So I'm going to look to kind of staff guidance to say, knowing that that was an ask that we're looking for conversation on. I'm assuming that's the top threshold. It might be less. But I want to make sure we can fully consider it and not dismiss it. So should we be actually tabling an amendment to this budget to place hold $25,000 knowing it's being discussed within the next 4 weeks?
So just prior to that, just a clarification, the $25,000, is it related to the operating or the capital budget?
Through you, Mayor Lima, I believe it would be operating.
From the operating budget?
Okay, correct.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Mr. Miller can correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, it's been a few years now that we've provided funding to them, so I guess my concern is that reserves are supposed to be used for things that are one-time funding formula as opposed to something that's ongoing. So in saying that, am I true in believing that if we are going to fund this moving forward, that a motion should be coming forward tonight and it will have an impact on the tax levy?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey and members of Council, I don't have the specifics of what is or isn't in their budget right now in terms of what we provide the farmers market, if anything. But to answer your question, yeah, if it's an ongoing funding source, it's generally from a revenue and not from a reserve. As you know, the city's reserves are sort of under pressure. But there is that option. There's also the option of discussing it in March, and if there's a decision made where you want to have some funding, you can use reserves or ask staff to look at existing budgets, that sort of thing.
I'm just going to intercede there for a second. CAO Prowse.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I thought maybe I could provide a little bit of clarity on it, only because the referral motions passed by Council really identified two issues. One was a funding for a consultant that Ms. Schlichter had set aside, and the question was, do we go back out to market? And Council has opted to review that option. I think our discussion at the time was, that money isn't necessarily affected because it's a one-time cost and we would tap a reserve for that if needed. I think this discussion is now around the grant requested by the farmers market, which my understanding was a one-time grant. I think given the exceptional circumstances around COVID, et cetera, Council made the decision at that time. So that hasn't been a historic grant. It isn't an annual grant. It was a one-time grant, but I believe the request was for Council to consider either making it another one-time grant or to make it operational year in and year out. And I agree. I think a motion would be required for Council's consideration.
Are you complete, Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you. I'll leave it at that, but I do agree with CAO Prowse that, it was a one-off, and I wish these people would have come to us with some type of a deputation for a little bit more of an understanding as to what this funding is for, opposed to just a singular letter. I think what you were referencing in March was our first Finance Committee meeting, which would then put it off even further down the road, even if it does get passed through Finance Committee, before it would hit General Committee for further discussion and approval. But I'll leave what direction you decide to take it in your hands.
Councillor Congo?
Not sure how best to juggle this one. Again, because it was like we kind of pumped them past the point of budget, knowing that they already reported on it, and it was the pop-up market. So I don't believe they're looking necessarily for the same amount of funding, but that ask was for them to come and formally present with a bit of an ask, knowing that dollars were attached. So I'm hearing that perhaps it's preferred that we put something aside. I'm fine to hold off as long as we as a council as a whole will still have an appetite to receive something rather than saying you've missed the mark because we're talking about it in March. Because they had already come identifying an ask. But it just hasn't become part of the conversation. So if I need to, I will put a motion on the floor, but I'll wait and see if there's any other discussion. I'm not sure if Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I just didn't want to interrupt, but point of clarity, I think the only thing from listening to what To say there's an appetite for council to fund without any information, I find hard. I think it basically comes down at this stage where an amendment to the budget is made by the councillor, and if it's supported, then the money's there, and if it's not used, then it would go back to reserves after the fiscal year. But to say that we have an appetite now without any information, I couldn't support that. So it's just, or we're going to give them what they asked or they were granted last year or during COVID, but to say that we would support it, or because then it would have to come out of reserves. So basically tonight you have to move an amendment.
Councillor Kunkel.
Yeah. And in correspondence to that, I agree with you. I'm not comfortable kind of unless we have to placehold it. So for me, my point of overall question is, we know this money's coming. We haven't talked about it. It's not in the budget. Are we as a council expecting it to come, or we're open to it? But I'm assuming to hear we're moving forward with the March conversation where we have asked them to come forward and present on a couple of different conditions. And then if they place an ask for about $20,000, I guess it'll just have to come back to council, and it will be the will of this table about whether or not you consider it.
So Councillor Kunkel, because I don't have it in front of me, I'm going on only memory at this point. Was there a request for an exact dollar amount?
Not a request, it was a reference. So the letter identified an intention to, one, look at space within the facility, knowing that they want to remain within the City Hall and that, but the other scope was reporting on what they managed to do with $25,000 one time, and that one time was the mobile market initiative, which had great results. So I don't want to see us jeopardize considering the benefits of that for our community because of the budget process and timeline. So I'm happy to frame a motion that says we're going to hold $25,000 on condition of council receiving information and then motioning in support of actually allocating it. I don't know if they need that much. I don't believe they need more, but I think it's for them to present and make the ask. But we have heard that it's of interest to continue.
Okay, so it's a little bit tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, CEO Prowse, if there was a, let's make this your problem. If I can be blunt. So if we could, if we decided at the March meeting, which then would flow through General Committee and City Council, that there was a worthwhile investment being looked at with regards to mobile farmers market. For this year, we potentially could set aside $25,000 from one of the reserves to fund that, with a recommendation that it be included in a future budget consideration going forward. Is that an option?
To you, Mayor Nuttall, I think that is probably the best option and the cleanest option. If council wants to consider it, they can do it as a one-time from a reserve. If you choose to operationalize it for future years, you could give that direction in advance of next budget. Okay. So, Councillor Hamilton.
Sorry, I just want to clarify then. So we would wait until the March meeting to have the discussion, ask the questions, understand what that $20,000 would be utilized for, and at that point decide if we wanted to go ahead, then we could dip into the reserves for one time. So nothing tonight. We're not approving holding the $20,000. Okay, thank you.
Correct. Okay, so Councillor Kunkel.
So I would just say if that's the will of council around being able to receive something after we close budget off, I think that is great because we want to work with transparency around money, but I don't want to close the doors from us based on a month out conversation. So I will hold, I won't make a motion, and then we'll look to see what happens through finance and responsible governance.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's probably the best course of action. Are there other questions or comments or amendments with regards to the 2023 budget and business plan? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Moved by myself and seconded by Deputy Mayor Thompson that motion 23-G-023 of Section C of the General Committee report dated February 8th and 9th, 2023 be amended in paragraph 3 A, to add the following new investment service level recommendation: intake form 2799, economic development and tourism resourcing position.
It's moved by Councillor Harvey and seconded by Deputy Mayor Thompson that motion 23-G-023 of Section C of the General Committee Report dated February 8th and 9th, 2023 be amended in paragraph 3A to add the following new investment service level recommendation: 2799, the economic development and tourism resourcing. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. After further discussion with staff in regards to this position, because it does not have any impact on the tax levy, it's fully funded by the municipal accommodation tax reserve, that I've opted to bring this back forward because my concerns that I raised at the last meeting in regards to the up-and-coming sports tourism strategy that will be presented to us in the coming months, that this position will not be impacted by that, because when this person is hired, the new sports tourism strategy is going to be inclusive of this position, so that way we wouldn't have to be worrying about potential implications down the road with a change in responsibilities, which potentially could trigger increase in pay. So my concerns there are alleviated after further discussions with both Ms. Schlichter and also Ms. Giannino, our HR director.
Are there any questions or comments from members of council regarding the motion on the floor to amend the budget by Councillor Harvey? Seeing none, all those in favour? It carries. We're now back on the main motion with regards to the 2023 business plan and budget. Are there any other comments? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll try to keep my comment general to the budget as presented. It was kind of inspired from the farmers market discussion and a great comment by Councillor Harvey, but I'll stick it to the main one. I think we need to be very careful in tough times of inflation and increases, and we're trying to be efficient about going out of our way to add service partners, formal service partners or accidental service partners, going out of our way to increase operations. I think the point needs to be repeated. One-off funding is great, and that's what the reserves are for, but when you start stabilizing that funding into permanent funding, careful what you wish for. That doesn't mean we don't like X, Y, and Z. I can think of the BIA when they asked for open-air Dunlop funding. That was a great example of a global 100-year pandemic coming into town, in addition to the reconstruction of the road and an idea that had been bubbling since the 80s, let's shut down Dunlop for a period of time, finally got executed and provided a lifeline to businesses. The council at the time thought it was appropriate to give money, and I believe they did it more than once. And, you know, we haven't heard from the BIA, but is that going to be another ask? Maybe. And that's no longer reserve money. That's stabilized operational subsidies. Same thing with the farmers market, and same thing with some other service provider, whether it be social services. So I think these are tough conversations to have. They're not easy, and I'm trying to keep them general, so it's not just about the farmers market. But in a time where we're trying to keep the line on spending at City Hall and also expect the same of our service providers, we need to have that tough conversation about one-time and stabilizing operations.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Any other questions or comments with regards to the budget? None. I would just like to make a couple of comments, and it kind of struck me today that we focused a lot last week, both on Wednesday and Thursday, on really what we weren't spending, right? Like, we've got to watch our costs. And in conversations today with Stephanie Schlichter, we were talking about culture, and there's our public services put so much time and effort into bringing forward a budget, and then we go through the service recommendations and additions, and we go through the efficiencies, and we go through the capital plan, and and maybe I'm just saying we, and I should say I, to be honest here, but I then put so much weight in the things that I say, I can't approve that, I can't do that, I don't see that in the master plan of the budget. I wish that was changed here and this there. But this stuck out to me, and it stuck out to me because I had the opportunity, along with members of council, quite a number of you were there, to go to the Barrie Arts Awards this year. And we talked about long-term sustainable funding. So in this year's budget, there's a reinvestment in the city's culture plan, which expired in 2016. It'll be updated and expanded to incorporate public art strategy, which is one of the committees that was created by, I believe, the former council, if not 2 councils ago. A sustainable funding source for the McLaren Arts Centre as a cultural pillar. A net increase for all other arts and cultural organizations through Arts Investment Fund, which has increased by more than 7%. Ongoing support for public art, cultural development operating budgets. And there's also, obviously, this is going to support cultural tourism. We've just seen there's an addition of a staff member it's going to help tourism as a whole, but sports tourism will be part of that. Cultural tourism will be part of that. There is a really strong investment being made here in the cultural fabric of our city. And when I had, the week to think about it and what's coming at us, we're going to deal with this on the 8th of March. $200 million is going to be approved by approving the county plan, $200 million in social housing. That's pretty incredible. Managing to keep the city operations at zero. That's, for me, an incredible amount of work that's being put in by the public service, quite frankly, to do that. To invest in all of those capital projects right around the city in all of your wards. The one that stood out to me the most is getting Bryan Drive done. It is just so necessary, and Councillor Ritma, I'm not sure it helps that many people in Ward 1, to be honest with you, but they go there too. Okay, it will help significantly from the downtown through the west side of the city and even across to the southeast side of Barrie as well. And I think there's been a lot of work that's been put into this by our public service, and again, we get to take credit for it, whether that's good or bad. But I did want to take the opportunity to say thank you, CAO Prowse, to you and your team, that really grand team across all of the levels, because the more I dive into the process, the more I realize it's come up from the ground up inside the organization, and I found it to be a really good approach. And I think that obviously there's some things that we can do differently. Timing wasn't perfect this time because of the election and all of those things. But really, this is a well-rounded budget that invests in infrastructure, social infrastructure, cultural infrastructure, as well as maintaining costs, keeping them in line. So those are my comments on the overall budget. In terms of the deputation that was made this evening, I believe it's 3 weeks tonight. We will be discussing the service partners, which is where I believe that this should sit. And also, we have 4 members of our council here that are part of the committee out at Simcoe County. We were all there, was it yesterday or the day before? It was this week. And we can take that information there as well. And thank you for bringing that and highlighting that information, because that's, I'm hearing things that I've never heard before. So it's good information. With that, any other, Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I think, too, this budget, you actually set the tone, because all you had to do is turn to page 60 and start reviewing the mayor's office asks and see that there was a decrease of 33.25%, and that wasn't all inclusive of the additional staff member that we had last term, which added another $90,000 to it. So you've actually decreased the mayor's budget by 46%, and I think that really sets the tone moving forward as to a whole new level of fiscal responsibility and making sure that the taxpayers are getting value for their money. And You're doing it by showing that leadership.
Well, I didn't do it on purpose. I'm just kidding.
I just thought that it was important to highlight because I know that was the first thing when I was going through the operational binder. That was the one that really caught my eye because typically we always see marginal incremental increases across the board, whereas when I saw such a dramatic decrease, I was like, wow, what's he doing differently in there? But it's good to see, and I look forward to working with you this term. And you really did set a new threshold when it comes to fiscal responsibility moving forward. When you've been able to do that yourself.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey, and obviously thank you for all the help that you've put into this entire budget process. I would, when that gets brought up, I would actually like to highlight that I did, I think transparency is just overly important. And members of council are aware of this, but since breaking my, I don't even know the name of the bone I broke. Since breaking it, we've had to add a person in to help be able to, quite frankly, get me around and also support all of the other things that are happening. So I'm not sure if maybe that has changed a little bit. I don't know what the total ramification of that would be, but I do want to be open and transparent to that in front of the public, not just council. So. And thank you, Council, for your indulgence on that, because it does help me quite a bit.
I think in saying that, you're still within the proposed budget from the numbers that I've looked at.
Okay. Well, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from members of Council? With that, I'll call the vote. All of those in favor? And it carries unanimously. So we've completed the reports from General Committee. We'll move past deferred business as there's none to direct motions. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Moved by myself and seconded by yourself. A direct motion. Oh, sorry, I have to do the pursuant by. I apologize. That pursuant to section 7.1 of the procedural bylaw 2019-100, permission be granted to introduce a motion without notice concerning an application for federal youth prevention and well-being funding.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson, and I'll just note that was actually seconded by Councillor Neguse. That a motion without notice, moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Neguse. Motion without notice, application for federal youth crime prevention and well-being funding. That pursuant to section 7.1 of the procedural bylaw 2019-100, permission be granted to introduce a motion without notice concerning an application for federal youth crime prevention and well-being funding. As this is a motion without notice, we'll call the vote for it to be able to be introduced. All those in favor? It carries unanimously. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Neguse. A direct motion application for federal youth crime prevention and wellness funding. That should the city application for federal funding be approved, the General Manager of Community and Corporate Services be authorized to execute the required funding agreement with the federal government to develop a comprehensive multi-year strategy to address conditions that contribute to youth persons falling in with crime, create safe spaces, and empower young people to drive situations to set them up for success and recruit for temporary positions, project manager, youth program coordinators, and recreation leaders that will be fully funded through the agreement to develop the strategic and pilot initiatives in 2023 and early 2024. Sorry, I was reading it off my phone.
No problem. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Negussi. Direct motion application for federal youth crime prevention and well-being funding that should the city's application for federal funding be approved, the General Manager of Community and Corporate Services be authorized to A, execute the required fund agreement with the federal government to develop a comprehensive multi-year strategy to address the conditions that contribute to a young person falling in with crime, create safe spaces and empower young people and communities to drive solutions to set them up for success, and B, recruit for temporary positions, project manager, youth program coordinators, and recreation program leaders that will be fully funded through the agreement to develop the strategy and pilot initiatives in 2023 to early 2024. Are there any comments or questions around the table with regards to the direct motion? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. Do we need this? What I mean by that is budget. In the budget, Section 16 says that staff be authorized to submit applications for grants that would reduce future capital expenditures, fund service enhancements, or enable capital projects to be advanced, and a report or memo will be presented as appropriate prior to the execution of the agreement. I'm specifically looking at the fund service enhancement section. In the past, and a lot of new members of council, I've tried to do little things like, oh, that we apply for more grant money, or have we done that? And it's always been like, we're always doing that. And then I saw that it was already ratified in our bulk package that we passed. So I guess I'm not against it. This is one of those acts that just that look great, and I can't see anybody voting against it. I just don't know if it's needed based on Section 16 that we approved.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Mr. Calpine.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle, and through you to Councillor Morales. Given that the city would be executing an agreement and retaining temporary staff that weren't part of council's authorization, it was a conservative view that we should get specific approval given the additional staffing positions and the actual agreement itself. While the motion authorizes us to submit the applications, it doesn't necessarily authorize us to execute it, and that wording was specifically designed to not provide that authority for something that was a significant change in the services that we deliver to ensure that that would come back to council before we executed an agreement.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. Do I support trying to do our part to keep kids out of crime? Yes.
Councillor Morales, I think you may just manage to ask yourself a question and answer it in the same sentence. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments with regards to the motion? Okay. Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? It's approved unanimously. We are now at inquiries. Deputy Mayor Thompson, do you have any inquiries?
I do not, Mayor Nettle.
Members of council, do you have any inquiries? Seeing none, we will move on to announcements. Deputy Mayor Thompson?
I have none.
And members of council, Councillor Rittman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to let everyone know that Heritage Week is February the 20th to the 26th. That's something that people are encouraged to take part in and to learn and understand something about our heritage. And if you want more information, you can go to heritagetrust.ca, and that will give you some more information. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rittman. Are there any other announcements at this point? Seeing none, I will we'll go into announcements. There's quite a few this evening. I would say that the first one is a very important one, that the City of Barrie will be proclaiming February 24th as a one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine Day, that there will be a flag raising here as well as an opportunity for members of the community to meet and discuss all that is transpired in terms of this invasion. And so if you're looking for information on that, I know that we'll have something online, and also there's a number of local Ukrainian Canadian groups that you can search online. The city's annual I Love Barrie contest launched is now open for entries. Students from kindergarten to grade 12 can express why they love Barrie by sharing artwork, a short story, or a photo. The contest deadline is March 31st at 4:30 p.m. For more information, please visit barrie.ca/lovebarrie. The City of Barrie, along with the Barrie Public Art Committee, is inviting proposals from local and regionally based professional artists to participate in the Brightening Barriers project. The project pairs artists with downtown Barrie businesses to turn patio fencing from barrier to canvas. Submissions will be accepted until 5 p.m. on March 13th. For more information, visit barrie.ca/publicart. The City of Barrie is hosting the 8th annual Family Day Winter Adventure at the Barrie Community Sports Complex for parents and kids to be active together in the great outdoors. Indoor fun will be also available on Family Day with a full schedule of drop-in activities in Allendale, East Bayfield, and the Peggy Hill Team Community Centers. More details, please visit barrie.ca/Family Day Winter Adventure. Citizen applications for the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, Arts Advisory Committee, Communities in Bloom Committee, Seniors and Accessibility Advisory Committee, and the Town and Gown Committee will be accepted until Friday, February 17th at 4:30 p.m. For more information, email appoint@barrie.ca or visit barrie.ca/committees and task forces. Hello Winter continues through the month of February, offering activities to get out and enjoy the winter season. For a full calendar of events and programming, please visit barrie.ca/hellowinter. Until March 31st, overnight waterfront parking restrictions are in effect in any waterfront or hybrid parking lots or waterfront on-street areas from 12:01 to 5 a.m. or on-street parking from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the downtown business improvement area and other city streets from 12:01 to 7 a.m. For more information, please visit barrie.ca/snow. There will be no meeting held next week due to the Family Day holiday. The Finance and Responsible Governance Committee and General Committee meetings will be held on Wednesday, March the 1st. We are now into bylaws. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Hamilton. Leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 007, 008, 009, 010, 011, 012, 013, 014.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bills 007, 008, 009, 010, 011, 012, 013, and 014. Are there any questions and comments from members of Council? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time on this day finally passed. Bill 0115.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that the confirmation bylaw, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed to Bill 15. Are there any questions or comments with regards to the confirmation bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. Do I have a motion to adjourn? It's moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Harris. All those in favor? It's unanimous. We are adjourning at 8:34 p.m.
That was the update from the last City Council meeting. We will continue to bring more update about the housing crisis and other issues. Thanks for watching.